So I read Scaffolding by Lauren Elkin. I'm now in Scotland, so I don't have the book with me, but is this the snootiest debut novel that has ever been published? I cannot. It simultaneously was doing too much while also not being enough. I can't quite explain it. The book takes place in Paris, and Lauren Elkin spent a couple of decades living in Paris, but the book so desperately wants you to believe that it is French, when Lauren Elkin is in fact a native New Yorker. So the whole thing comes across as very inauthentic. The tone, it just wasn't. It was giving me like a bastardized version of A Movable Feast, you know, like that the book where Hemingway is basically just being a little bitch around Paris. Like it was very that, but this like modern sort of weird girl lit version, but it wasn't weird enough, and it had a lot to say about feminism and women's lib, but none of it was really landing because there wasn't enough to hold on to. Was actually really looking forward to reading this because the concept of, oh, it's a apartment that one household lived in and then another household lived in 60 years apart, that's really cool, you know, seeing how one singular property has shaped the lives and the generations that have all shared it over time. Like that's a fun concept, but the way it was executed, no, no, no. I thought this writer had a lot of ideas. The execution, horrible. If you're going to do one of these seesaw narratives where we bounce backwards and forwards between the past and the present, something better be bouncing, because we were 143 pages into the story. I counted them because I was flabbergasted. 143 pages into this book that is less than 400, so almost halfway through the book. That was our first jump. That's when we go back to like the 60s, and it's like second wave of feminism, Gloria Steinem, all of that. What your whole concept is supposed to be the go-between of these two generations, and you're not even going to explore that properly. Like the whole thing was just a sandwich. The first 140 pages were in the present. We went back into the past, not even for very long, and then we just went back to the present. It's like, oh, so it wasn't really what you set out to do at all. I'm obviously setting a high bar that doesn't need to be set with this comparison, but I'm just thinking how awesome Cloud Atlas is. Like, Cloud Atlas is such a labour of love, and if she had found a way to channel just a little bit of that, so instead of it being incarnations of the same person like it is in Cloud Atlas, if it was incarnations of this same house, because some properties, hundreds and hundreds of years, you know, buildings stay around for a while. So if we had gone from the very beginning of when this building was commissioned, and then generation after generation, we looked through half a dozen different lives all connected by living in this same building, would have been fabulous. I would have been so much more here for that concept. Instead, what we get is a very depressing, very unentertaining discussion about psychoanalysis. I think Lauren Elkin must have some kind of connection to the field of psychology, because there are vast swathes of this book where it just talks about the psyche, but not in an interesting way. It very much feels like you're sitting in a lecture theatre and someone is droning on about psychology to you. Like, you're trying to get invested, but there's so much Freud babble. You're just like, oh, okay, yeah, lovely. Like, it wasn't a captivating story. It definitely felt like this author was inspired by My Year of Rest and Relaxation, because it has that same vibe of like, oh, our main character Anna is very apathetic, borderline agoraphobic. She stays indoors. She doesn't really do much. The tone of that seemed wrong though, because she was coming to terms with a miscarriage, and like her fiance slash husband, I wasn't sure what their relationship status was, but he had left for London because he was involved in like the legal stuff with Brexit. So he was out of the country, and she was all on her own in this apartment trying to get it renovated while also dealing with her miscarriage. And so the whole thing felt a bit like, okay, we get the sense that there's this pent up female rage, and at some point the dam is going to burst and she's going to give us like a blaze of glory, and it never really happens. I was quite disappointed. For me, the only reason that the mundanity in My Year of Rest and Relaxation works is because of Atessa Moshfegh. She has such an acid wit that she makes it so irreverent and endearing. Like, you see the sort of like brassiness of the main character, the way that she just doesn't care for anything or anyone, and you relate to her, and it's not easy to get those feelings across, and I think this writer really fumbled the ball on that one. I thought all of the commentary about women not feeling safe in modern day Paris, I thought that was well done with like the signs. So our main character Anna, she keeps seeing these signs that her friend Clementine has been putting up throughout Paris, and they're all talking about these women that have been violently killed, and that was okay. Like, I appreciated where that was coming from, because London has a very similar issue with like women not feeling safe, women being pursued by violent men. So I liked that. I don't know, it was lost for me in too many other bigger issues. Speaking of Clementine, so Anna has this younger friend. She keeps coming into her flat to talk to her. Again, it's very similar to My Year of Rest and Relaxation, where the main character in that has a friend that keeps visiting and is sort of like their sole connection to the outside world. But the reason I bring her up is because they then are intimate with each other, but it felt so, I don't know, incidental. It felt like, oh, I'm just going to put this here because it ticks a box. Like, it adds nothing to her character at all. It's completely pointless, except for now this is like an LGBTQ inclusive book. Now it has wider appeal. Like, I guess. Like, what was the angle there? What was the point in her having this relationship with Clementine? And was it even real? Because there were parts of the book that were very like fever dream-esque, so I didn't even know if it had happened. I think it did, but yeah, very strange. This book also really tries to lean into the spice aspect of the storytelling, and I don't think it's successful. Like, The Guardian, I think, has described this book as like racy. I'm not seeing it. Like, sure, there are moments where things happen. Maybe I'm looking at this as like a queer person, and because it's like heterosexual intimacy, I'm just like, ugh. But yeah, for the most part, it just felt very vanilla to me. Like, all of the adult scenes, none of them were particularly like racy or inventive. I wasn't like, oh wow, that's some intense writing. It was just like, pff. Like, it's not as filthy as you think it is. Maybe that says something about me, I don't know. So yeah, that was Scaffolding. You know I don't mince my words. It is one of the most disappointing things that I've read this year. Only because I expected such good things from it. And it really just felt like an American's take on like Paris being the height of sophistication in Europe. And then everything else was just wrapped up in all of that. I was like, not for me. Not for me. I would chalk up the main issue being the fact that this author wasn't thinking big enough, which is a common issue with debut authors. Debut authors can be very tentative because they don't want to push the boat out too far because they want to get published. And I think this needed to, go for broke. If you're going to give us a modern novel that's supposed to be about women's lib, go wild with it, because this was just, dare I say, boring. It was quite boring.